You know that feeling when your whole world tilts sideways in an instant? When something so unbelievable happens that your brain can't even process it at first. That's exactly what happened to me on an ordinary Tuesday evening when I opened my mail and found mortgage documents for a house I'd never seen, with a loan I'd never applied for, but somehow bearing my signature. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 34, work as a senior financial analyst in Boston, and I thought I had my life figured out. I'd worked my way up from nothing, paid off my student loans, built a solid emergency fund, and finally felt financially secure after years of struggle. But in that moment, staring at those papers showing a $480,000 mortgage in my name, I realized my own family had been plotting against me in ways I never could have imagined before. I tell you how this nightmare began and how it ended in a courtroom. That divided my family forever. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I've been amazed by how many people have faced similar family betrayals. And if you want to hear more stories that might help you recognize the warning signs in your own family, hit that subscribe button, because what happened to me could happen to anyone. To understand how my parents could justify committing federal crimes in my name, you need to understand the twisted dynamics of the Mitchell family. I grew up in suburban Connecticut with my parents, Linda and Robert Mitchell, and my younger sister Emma, who's 3 years my junior. From the outside, we probably looked like a typical middle-class family. But inside our house, there was always an unspoken hierarchy that put Emma's needs above everything else, including basic fairness. The pattern started early. When I was 8 and Emma was 5, I remember my making me give Emma my favorite toy just because Emma wanted it. "Sarah's the big sister," she'd say. "Big sisters share." But when Emma broke my things or took something of mine, I was told to be understanding because she was younger. This wasn't just typical sibling stuff. It was a systematic training that my role in the family was to sacrifice for Emma's happiness. School only reinforced these dynamics. When I brought home straight A's, my parents would say, "That's nice, honey," and move on to asking Emma about her day. When Emma brought home C's and D's, they'd celebrate like she'd won the Nobel Prize. "We're so proud of you for trying your best," they'd gush, taking her out for ice cream while I sat at home doing extra credit work, hoping maybe if I achieved just a little more, I'd get that same enthusiastic praise. The financial inequality became more obvious as we got older. For my 16th birthday, I got a used bicycle from a garage sale. My parents made a big show of how practical and environmentally conscious it was. For Emma's 16th birthday, she got a brand new Honda Civic with a ribbon on top. When I asked why the difference was so dramatic, my mom said, "Well, Sarah, you're so independent and responsible. We know you'll figure out transportation. Emma needs more support." That word, independent, became weaponized against me throughout my teenage years. Every time I had a need or wanted something, I was told I was so independent and could handle it myself. Meanwhile, Emma was sensitive and needed extra help, which justified my parents meeting her every need, while leaving me to fend for myself. The college years were when the financial disparity became impossible to ignore. I had worked part-time jobs since I was 14, saving every penny for college. I applied for scholarships, filled out financial aid forms, and researched the most affordable schools with good programs. My parents contributed exactly $0 to my education. "You're so smart and motivated," my dad said. "You'll figure it out. Besides, we need to save for Emma's college fund." I lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for 4 years, worked 25 hours a week at the campus library, and graduated with $40,000 in student loan debt. It took me 6 years of living in a tiny studio apartment with 3 roommates to pay it off, but I was proud of my independence. I thought my parents would be proud too, but they seemed almost annoyed by my success, as if it was somehow showing off. Emma, meanwhile, went to 3 different colleges over 5 years, never completing a degree anywhere. Each time she decided a school wasn't the right fit, My parents would pay her full tuition at the next place, cover her apartment, give her spending money, and never question her decisions. By the time she was 24, they had spent over $200,000 on her various educational experiments while I was still paying off my student loans from a degree I'd actually completed. After college, I got an entry-level position at a financial services firm in Boston. I lived with roommates until I was 28, drove a 10-year-old car, and put every spare dollar toward debt repayment and building an emergency fund. It wasn't glamorous, but it was building towards something. By the time I was 30, I had paid off my student loans, had a solid emergency fund, and was contributing to retirement. I felt proud of what I built through discipline and hard work. Emma bounced from job to job, retail, waitressing, administrative work, never staying anywhere more than a few months. She lived in our parents' basement rent-free until she was 26. When she finally moved out, my parents co-signed her lease, paid her security deposit, furnished her apartment, and continued giving her money whenever she called asking for help. The financial requests started subtly. Emma's car would break down, and instead of calling a mechanic, my mom would call me. "You're so good with money, Sarah. Surely you could spare a few hundred for your sister's car repair. She really needs it for work." Or Emma would want to take a vacation with friends, but couldn't afford it. And my dad would suggest I treat her as an early birthday gift, even if her birthday was months away. Each time I felt that familiar mixture of resentment and obligation. I usually give in, telling myself it was just a one-time thing and that family helps family. But it was never just once. It became an unspoken expectation that since I was doing well financially, I should subsidize Emma's lifestyle choices. Family gatherings became increasingly uncomfortable as I entered my 30s. I'd mention a promotion or a small investment I'd made, and my mom would immediately pivot to how Emma was struggling with rent or credit card debt. The implication was always crystal clear. Your success creates an obligation to solve her problems. Last Christmas was particularly painful. I'd just gotten promoted to senior financial analyst, which came with a significant salary increase. When my aunt asked how work was going, I made the mistake of mentioning it. Within minutes, my dad pulled me aside to discuss Emma's debt consolidation situation. "She's drowning in interest payments," he said, "with your new position helping. Her out wouldn't even make a dent in your budget." I deflected, saying I needed to review my finances, but as we were leaving, I overheard my mom telling Emma, "Don't worry, sweetie. We'll work something out with Sarah. She just doesn't understand how hard it is for normal people." The irony of calling Emma normal while I was apparently abnormal for supporting myself was not lost on me. But despite everything, I still craved their approval. I wanted them to be proud of what I'd accomplished. I wanted them to see that I built something meaningful without a safety net. Deep down, I think I was still that little girl hoping that if I just achieved enough, worked hard enough, saved enough money, they'd finally see me as worthy of the same love and support they freely gave Emma. That hope was about to be shattered. In the most devastating way possible, it was a typical Tuesday in March when everything changed. I had just gotten home from work, still in my professional attire when I sorted through the day's mail. Bills, advertisements, the usual stuff. But then there was this thick envelope from Bay State Mortgage Company that I almost threw away. Thinking it was promotional material, something made me open it instead. Inside was a complete mortgage application and approval package for 342 Maple Ridge Drive in Newton, Massachusetts, an upscale suburb about 15 minutes from Boston. The loan amount was $480,000. The monthly payment was calculated at $2,950 for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, and listed as the primary borrower, complete with signature and social security number. Was me. I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. I had never seen this property. I had never applied for this mortgage. Yet there was my signature, or what appeared to be my signature, on multiple documents throughout the package. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and called the mortgage company. But it was after business hours. I left what I hoped was a coherent voicemail about potential identity theft and fraud, then spent the most sleepless night of my life wondering how this could have happened. My mind raced through possibilities. Had someone stolen my identity? Was this some elaborate scam? Had there been a clerical error? The next morning, before I could call the mortgage company back, my phone rang. It was my mom. "Hi, honey," she said cheerfully, as if she were calling to chat about the weather. "Did you get those mortgage papers yesterday?" My blood ran cold. "Mom, what's going on?" "These papers have my name on them for a house I know nothing about." "Well, that's exactly what we need to discuss," she said in that tone she used when she was about to explain something she thought I was too stupid to understand on my own. "Your father and I think it's time we all sit down for a family dinner. Can you come over tonight? Emma will be there too." "Mom, I need to know what's happening right now," I said, my voice rising. "Is this some kind of identity theft?" "How do you even know about these papers?" "Don't be so dramatic, Sarah," she sighed. "It's a family matter. We'll explain everything tonight at 6. She hung up before I could say another word. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the day in a fog of anxiety and confusion. I tried to research the property online and found it was a beautiful 3-bedroom, colonial in one of Newton's most desirable neighborhoods. Recently sold for exactly $480,000. My stomach churned as I began to piece together what might be happening. That evening, I drove to my parents' house with a growing sense of dread. Emma's car was already in the driveway, a relatively new Toyota Camry that my parents had helped her finance 2 years earlier. When I walked inside, they were all sitting in the living room looking disturbingly calm and prepared. My mom poured me a glass of wine without asking if I wanted one. My dad gestured to the armchair across from them, positioning me like I was being interviewed rather than joining a family discussion. "Sarah," my father began, "we know you're confused about the mortgage documents, but we've been planning this for quite some time." "Planning what exactly?" I asked, the wine untouched on the coffee table. "Well, as you know, Emma has been renting that overpriced apartment in Cambridge," my mother chimed in. "And with the housing market being what it is, we thought it was time she had something of her own to build equity. That's great," I said cautiously. "But what does any of this have to do with me?" My father cleared his throat in that way he did before delivering news he expected resistance to. "We found the perfect starter home in Newton. Great neighborhood, good schools for when she eventually has children, convenient to everything." My mother continued seamlessly. "The thing is, with Emma's credit history and employment situation, she couldn't qualify for a mortgage on her own." The horrible realization was starting to crystallize, but I needed to hear them say it out loud. "So you use my information, my credit, my income." "Now don't get upset," my father said sternly, raising his hand as if to stop my reaction before it started. "We've decided that you should be the one to pay for this mortgage." I stared at them in complete disbelief. The words hung in the air, like poison gas. "You decided, without asking me, without my consent. You're doing so well in your career," my mother said, as if that explained everything. "Your sister needs this house, and family takes care of family." Emma, who had been silent up to this point, finally spoke. "It's not like you can't afford it, Sarah. You're always talking about your promotions and your investments. Meanwhile, I can barely make rent each month because you've never kept a job for more than a few months." I exploded, all the years of frustration finally boiling over. And even if I could afford it, which, by the way, I absolutely cannot without destroying my own financial future, that doesn't give anyone the right to commit fraud in my name. "Fraud is a very ugly word," my mother said, frowning. "We're family. How did you even do this?" I demanded. "How did you get my signature?" my financial information. My father shifted uncomfortably. We still had your old tax returns from when you lived here. And your mother? Well, she's always been good at copying signatures. I felt physically sick. So you forged my signature on legal documents. Do you have any idea how serious this is? This is identity theft. This is mortgage fraud. This is a federal crime. Don't be so dramatic, Emma scoffed. It's not like we're strangers taking advantage of you. We're your family. A family that apparently thinks it's okay to steal my identity and saddle me with $500,000 of debt without my permission. I was shouting now, unable to contain my fury and disbelief. Lower your voice, my father commanded in the tone that had cowed me as a child. The decision has been made. The house has already been purchased. Emma moves in next week. The decision has not been made, I said, standing up so abruptly that my chair nearly tipped over. I did not agree to this, and I will not be paying for a mortgage I didn't sign up for. What are you saying? My mother asked, her voice dropping to that dangerous low register I remember from childhood. I am saying no, absolutely not. I will not pay a single penny toward this mortgage. And tomorrow I'm reporting this as fraud to the police and the mortgage company. The room erupted. Emma burst into tears, wailing about how I was ruining her life and being selfish. My mother started listing all the sacrifices they'd supposedly made for me over the years, most of which were complete fabrications. My father threatened to disown me if I didn't do the right thing for once in your selfish life. The right thing? I laughed bitterly. The right thing would have been teaching Emma financial responsibility instead of enabling her dependency. The right thing would have been respecting me enough to at least ask before committing a felony in my name. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. My mother followed me, grabbing my arm hard enough to leave bruises. If you walk out that door, you're no longer part of this family, she hissed. I looked her straight in the eye. If being part of this family means letting you destroy my financial future and break federal law, then maybe I don't want to be part of it anymore. I drove home that night with tears streaming down my face, oscillating between rage, betrayal, and crushing grief. The family I'd spent my whole life trying to please had just revealed the true extent of their disregard for me. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource with an inconveniently independent mind, and that was just the beginning of the nightmare. The morning after that devastating family dinner, I knew I needed help, and fast. I called my friend Lisa, who works as a paralegal at a law firm specializing in white-collar crimes. My voice was still shaking with anger and disbelief as I explained what had happened. Sarah, this is incredibly serious, Lisa said after listening to my story. What your parents did is identity theft and mortgage fraud. These are federal crimes with severe penalties. I know, I said, feeling sick, but they're my parents. It would destroy Emma if they went to jail. Look, I'm not saying you have to press criminal charges right away, Lisa explained, but you absolutely need to protect yourself legally and financially. This mortgage is in your name. If payments aren't made, it's your credit that gets destroyed, your future that gets affected. Lisa connected me with Jennifer Walsh, an attorney at her firm who agreed to see me pro bono for an initial consultation. Jennifer didn't mince words. First, we need to document everything, she said. Then we need to formally notify the mortgage company, the property records office, and potentially law enforcement that this mortgage was obtained fraudulently without your consent. Will my parents definitely go to jail? I asked, still conflicted. Despite their betrayal. That depends on whether you choose to press criminal charges, Jennifer explained. But regardless, you need to legally separate yourself from this mortgage before any payments come due. Over the next week, I gathered evidence like I was building a criminal case, which in many ways I was. I collected the forged documents, printed out emails and text messages from my parents that proved they knew exactly what they were doing, and created a detailed timeline of events. Jennifer helped me draft a formal letter to my parents, sent. by certified mail, stating unequivocally that I would not accept responsibility for the mortgage, that I was aware of the fraud committed in my name, and that I would be taking all necessary legal steps to protect myself. 3 days after they would have received my letter, my father called. I let it go to voicemail, and his message was everything I expected. "Sarah, this childish tantrum has gone on long enough. Your mother is beside herself, and Emma has been crying for days. You need to grow up and accept your family responsibilities. Call us immediately so we can sort this out like adults." I didn't call back. Instead, I followed Jennifer's advice and sent formal notifications to the mortgage company and the county property records office, along with an affidavit stating that my signature had been forged. That's when things really escalated. My parents began calling me multiple times a day from different phone numbers to get around my call blocking. My mother showed up at my workplace, creating such a scene in the lobby that security had to escort her out. She told everyone who would listen that I was having a mental breakdown and making false accusations against my loving family. My father took it a step further, emailing my boss with claims that I was mentally unstable and making fraudulent reports against family members. Thankfully, my manager recognized this as harassment and was supportive, but it was humiliating and terrifying to have my professional reputation attacked. Emma launched what I can only describe as a social media smear campaign. She posted tearful videos about how her successful sister was trying to make her homeless out of spite. She shared manipulated screenshots of text conversations between us, edited to make me look heartless and cruel. She even created a GoFundMe titled "Abandoned by My Sister When I Needed Her Most," which raised several $1,000s based on a completely fictional version of events. The extended family mobilized against me too. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had strong opinions about my selfish behavior. Some sent me lengthy messages about family loyalty and how I was destroying the family over money. Others simply unfriended and blocked me on social media without even asking for my side of the story. The only family member who reached out with genuine concern was my maternal grandmother, Rose. "Sarah, honey," she said when she called, "there seems to be a lot of confusion about what's happening with your parents and sister. I'm not taking sides, but I'm here if you need to talk. I love you." That single message of unconditional support made me break down in tears. It was the only lifeline from my family that didn't come with strings attached or manipulation. Meanwhile, the mortgage company's fraud department had opened an investigation, but they warned me it could take months to resolve. They couldn't tell me what actions they might take against my parents due to the ongoing investigation, but they assured me that once the fraud was confirmed, my name would be removed from all documents. The stress began affecting every aspect of my life. I had trouble sleeping, often waking up from nightmares about being arrested for mortgage fraud or losing my job. My work performance slipped, leading to a concerned check-in from my manager. I stopped going to my weekly yoga class, avoided social situations, and basically shut down everything in my life except work and the legal case. Then came the ultimatum. My father left a voicemail that chilled me to the bone. "Sarah, this is your final warning. Your mother and I have consulted with our attorney. If you don't withdraw your fraud claims and take responsibility for your sister's mortgage by the end of this week, we will be filing a lawsuit against you for the full value of the house. You might think you're clever with your fancy Boston lawyer, but we have decades of evidence of verbal agreements and family commitments that any judge will recognize. Don't test us on this." I immediately forwarded the voicemail to Jennifer, who called me back within minutes. "They're bluffing," she assured me. "There's no such thing as enforceable verbal agreements about taking on someone else's $500,000 mortgage, and family commitments aren't legally binding contracts. So I should just ignore the threat?" I asked. Jennifer paused. "Not exactly. Frivolous or not, if they do file a lawsuit, you'll need to respond. And defending yourself even against baseless claims, can be expensive and stressful. What should I do? Continue documenting everything. Don't engage directly with them. And Sarah... You might want to consider filing for a restraining order. Given the escalating harassment, a restraining order against my own parents. The suggestion was so surreal that I laughed despite myself. But the laughter quickly turned to tears as the full weight of the situation crashed down on me again. How had it come to this? How had the people who were supposed to love and protect me become the ones I needed legal protection from? 4 days later, I got my answer when a process server appeared at my apartment door with lawsuit papers. My parents weren't bluffing. They were actually suing me for $480,000, the full value of the house they had fraudulently purchased in my name. As I sat on my couch that night, legal papers scattered around me, I realized I had hit rock bottom. I felt utterly alone. The family I had spent a lifetime trying to please had not only betrayed me, but was now actively trying to destroy the financial independence I had worked so hard to build. I wondered if I should just give in, pay the mortgage, accept the financial devastation, try to salvage whatever remained of my family relationships. But then I felt a surge of clarity cut through the emotional fog. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about standing up to decades of manipulation and unequal treatment. This was about refusing to be financially abused by the people who should have been my biggest supporters. I picked up my phone and called Jennifer. "They actually sued me," I said when she answered, "and I want to fight this all the way." The war for my financial freedom was just beginning. The lawsuit my parents filed against me was officially titled Mitchell v. Mitchell, a painfully ironic reminder of how family had turned against family. The complaint was 42 pages long, filled with allegations ranging from breach of implied family contract to unjust enrichment to something they called familial obligation violation, which isn't even a real legal concept. Jennifer reviewed the complaint and confirmed what she had suspected. It was legally baseless, designed primarily to intimidate me into compliance through the sheer cost and stress of defending myself. But baseless or not, I still needed to respond formally within 21 days or risk a default judgment against me for nearly $500,000. "I can help with the initial response," Jennifer offered, "but for a case this complex, you really need a litigation attorney who specializes in family financial disputes." The problem was that litigation attorneys are expensive prohibitively. So for someone with a decent but not extravagant salary like mine, Jennifer provided me with several referrals. And after consultations with 3 different lawyers, I settled on David Chin, who had an impressive track record in cases involving family financial exploitation. His retainer was $12,000, which represented nearly all of my carefully saved emergency fund. I felt sick signing the check, knowing that defending myself against my own family's bogus lawsuit was going to wipe out years of financial discipline. "I'll be honest with you, Sarah," David said during our first official meeting. "This case has no legal merit whatsoever. Your parents have absolutely no grounds to force you to pay for a mortgage you didn't consent to, especially one obtained through forged documents. That's good news, right?" I asked hopefully. "Yes and no. The good news is that we should eventually win. The bad news is that eventually could be a long and expensive road. Your parents' strategy appears to be draining you financially and emotionally until you give up and settle." David helped me file a comprehensive response to the complaint, denying all allegations and asserting counterclaims for harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and defamation based on the false statements my family had made about me publicly. We also filed a motion to dismiss the case entirely, arguing that there was no valid legal basis for their claims. But as David had warned, the legal system moves slowly. The judge assigned to our case, Susan Martinez, set a hearing date for the motion to dismiss 3 months away. In the meantime, my life continued to unravel. The mortgage company's fraud investigation was ongoing, but they informed me that Until it was resolved, the mortgage remained technically in my name. This was already impacting my credit score and ability to make any major financial decisions. I couldn't refinance my own small condo, couldn't get approved for a car loan when my 10-year-old Honda finally died, and couldn't even get a new credit card without jumping through extra hoops. Emma had indeed moved into the house at the center of the dispute. Posting smug photos on Instagram of her new home with captions like "blessed beyond measure" and "dreams really do come true when you have people who love you." Each post felt like a deliberate knife twist, especially knowing that I was paying legal fees to fight for my financial survival, while she lived in luxury bought with my stolen identity. The financial strain became increasingly severe. Between the legal retainer, ongoing attorney fees, and the time I had to take off work for depositions and meetings with David, I was rapidly depleting my savings. I had to cancel a planned vacation, stop contributing to my 401k, and start using credit cards for basic expenses like groceries, something I hadn't done since my post-college ramen noodle days. The emotional toll was even worse. I lost 15 pounds in 6 weeks because anxiety had destroyed my appetite. My hair started falling out in clumps from stress. I had panic attacks in the middle of the night, waking up gasping for air, convinced I was drowning and invisible. My few remaining friends tried to be supportive, but it was clear they were baffled by the situation. "Can't you just work this out?" they'd ask. "They're your family after all." Or worse, "Maybe you should consider helping your sister. If you can afford it, family is forever." These well-intentioned but clueless comments only deepened my isolation. No one seemed to understand the fundamental violation that had occurred, how my own parents had weaponized my financial responsibility against me, how they had committed actual federal crimes in my name, how they were now trying to legally strong-arm me into subsidizing my adult sister's lifestyle. Even my therapist, whom I started seeing twice weekly to cope with the anxiety, seemed to subtly suggest that perhaps there was a compromise to be found. "Sometimes in family conflicts," she said during one session, "winning the battle means losing the war. What would it mean to you to preserve these relationships, even at some financial cost?" I didn't return to her practice after that session. I didn't need another person suggesting that I should sacrifice my financial well-being on the altar of toxic family dynamics. 3 months into the lawsuit, my parents' attorney approached David with a settlement offer. I would take over the mortgage payments for 5 years, after which the house would be refinanced in Emma's name, assuming she could qualify by then, and my parents would drop the lawsuit. David presented the offer without recommendation, simply asking what I wanted to do. I sat in his office, staring at the settlement document, a turmoil of emotions churning inside me. Part of me, the exhausted, financially drained, emotionally depleted part, was tempted to accept. 5 years of mortgage payments would be crippling, but not completely ruinous. I could survive it. I might even recover eventually. But then I thought about what accepting would really mean. It would mean that my parents' tactics had worked. It would mean that forging my signature, stealing my identity, and then suing me when I objected was a successful strategy. It would mean signing up for 5 more years of financial control and manipulation. "No," I said finally, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "I won't settle. Not for 5 years, not for 5 months, not for 5 minutes. What they did was wrong, and I won't validate it by giving in now." David nodded, a hint of approval in his expression. "I'll convey your response. And Sarah, for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice." The night before our court date for the motion to dismiss, I hit my absolute lowest point. Sitting alone in my condo, surrounded by legal documents, unpaid bills, and the remnants of a dinner I couldn't finish, I broke down completely. I sobbed until I could barely breathe. Great heaving cries that seemed to come from the deepest part of my soul. I cried for the little girl who had always tried so hard to earn her parents' approval. I cried for the young woman who had put herself through college without support. I cried for the adult who had built a life of financial responsibility only To have it threatened by the very people who should have been proudest of her achievements. But as the tears finally subsided, I felt something shift within me. The grief was still there, but alongside it was a steely resolve I hadn't felt in months. I would not be broken by this. I would not let them win. Whatever happened in court, tomorrow I would face it with the same determination that had carried me through every other challenge in my life. I texted David, "I'm ready for tomorrow, whatever it takes." His response came quickly. "Get some rest. I'll see you at the courthouse at 8:30 a.m. And Sarah, you're stronger than you know." For the first time in months, I slept through the night without nightmares. The battle for my financial freedom was about to be decided. The Suffolk County Courthouse was an imposing granite building that seemed designed to intimidate. I arrived at 8:15 a.m., 15 minutes early, wearing my most professional Navy suit, and the confidence I've been building over sleepless nights. David met me on the courthouse steps, briefcase in hand and determination in his stride. "Remember," he said as we walked through security, "Judge Martinez has a reputation for being thorough and fair, but she doesn't tolerate emotional manipulation in place of legal arguments. Let me handle the talking unless she directly addresses you." We were directed to courtroom 3B, where several other cases were scheduled before ours. I spotted my parents and Emma sitting on the opposite side of the gallery, all three dressed in conservative outfits that screamed respectable family. My mother clutched a handkerchief as if already prepared for theatrical tears. My father sat rigidly upright, jaw clenched in that expression I'd known since childhood, the one that meant he expected complete compliance from everyone around him. Emma kept her eyes down, but I caught her shooting me venomous glances when she thought I wasn't looking. Their attorney, William Peterson, was a silver-haired man in expensive suit who radiated the kind of smug confidence that comes from winning cases through intimidation rather than law. At precisely 9 a.m., the bailiff called court to order, and Judge Susan Martinez entered. She was a Latina woman in her mid-50s with sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. She moved through the preliminary cases efficiently, but not hastily, giving each matter her full attention before moving to the next. At 10:30 a.m., the bailiff finally called Mitchell versus Mitchell. My stomach clenched as David and I approached the plaintiff's table while my parents and attorney Peterson took their places at the defendant's table. "We're here on the defendants." "Motion to dismiss," Judge Martinez stated, looking down at the thick file before her. "I've reviewed the complaint, the answer, and all supporting documents. Attorney Chen, as the moving party, you may begin." David stood and buttoned his jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case should be dismissed with prejudice because it fails to state any valid legal claim upon which relief can be granted. The plaintiffs are attempting to enforce a non-existent verbal agreement that their daughter would pay for a mortgage on a house purchased for their other daughter." He proceeded to methodically dismantle each claim in my parents' lawsuit, pointing out that no evidence existed of any agreement, that verbal contracts for real estate transactions are unenforceable under the statute of frauds, and that my parents had admitted in writing to forging my signature on mortgage documents, a federal crime. "Furthermore, Your Honor," David continued, "we have filed counterclaims for the emotional distress caused by this harassment campaign, as well as for damage to Miss Mitchell's credit score and financial standing resulting from the fraudulent mortgage." Judge Martinez listened attentively, occasionally making notes. When David finished, she turned to Attorney Peterson. "Counsel for the plaintiffs, your response." Judge Martinez said. Peterson rose with a theatrical flourish. "Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about family obligations and implied contracts that exist within the unique context of family relationships. The Mitchells raised their daughter, provided for her education, and supported her career aspirations. In return, there was an understanding that when her sister needed assistance, Sarah would provide it. I had to bite my tongue to keep from interrupting with the truth that my parents had contributed nothing to my education, and that any understanding existed solely in their imaginations. David had warned me to maintain a neutral expression regardless of what was said. But it took every ounce of self-control one possessed. Peterson continued, his voice taking on a dramatic quality. The Mitchells acted as agents for their daughter. In securing this mortgage, believing in good faith that she had agreed to help her sister achieve the American dream of home ownership. Only after the purchase was complete did Ms. Mitchell renege on this family commitment, leaving her parents with no choice but to seek legal remedy. Judge Martinez's expression remained neutral, but her next question suggested skepticism. Counselor, are you arguing that parents have an inherent legal right to forge their adult child's signature on mortgage documents based on a presumed family commitment? Peterson faltered slightly. Not in those exact terms, Your Honor, but within the context of the specific family dynamic. Let's be very clear, Judge Martinez interrupted. The complaint itself acknowledges that Ms. Mitchell's signature was applied to these documents without her physical presence. Are the plaintiffs disputing that this occurred? They're not disputing the signature issue, Your Honor, Peterson admitted. But they maintain that they had implied authority to act on her behalf based on previous family financial arrangements. Judge Martinez raised an eyebrow. I'd like to hear directly from the plaintiffs on this point. Mr. Mitchell, please approach. My father stood and walked to the witness stand where he was sworn in. His testimony was a masterclass in revisionist history and emotional manipulation. Your Honor, we've always been a close family that helps each other, he began, his voice warm and paternal. When Sarah was succeeding in her career, we were so proud. We naturally assumed, based on our family values, that she would want to help her sister, who hasn't been as fortunate. Did you specifically ask Ms. Mitchell if she would take on a $480,000 mortgage for her sister before you completed these documents? Judge Martinez asked directly. Well, not in those exact words, my father hedged. But we've had many conversations over the years about Emma's housing situation and Sarah's responsibility as a successful sibling to help out. So that's a no, Judge Martinez stated flatly. You did not explicitly ask, and she did not explicitly agree. It was understood, my father insisted. Mr. Mitchell, understanding that you are under oath, Judge Martinez continued, did you or did you not forge your daughter's signature on these mortgage documents? My father shifted uncomfortably. I wouldn't use the word forge, Your Honor. My wife signed on Sarah's behalf because we genuinely believed she would want to help her sister. Judge Martinez's expression hardened. Mr. Mitchell, signing someone else's name without their express permission is the definition of forgery. It doesn't matter if that person is your daughter or a complete stranger. My mother was called next and delivered a tearful performance about how I had abandoned my family responsibilities and how they had only acted out of desperate concern for Emma's well-being. She spoke of sleepless nights worrying about Emma's future, of the sacrifices they'd made as parents, and of their shock at my cold rejection of family loyalty. Emma followed with her own testimony, painting herself as the victim of my financial success and selfishness. She spoke of feeling abandoned by her only sister, of struggling to make ends meet while watching me thrive, and of the devastating impact my refusal was having on the entire family. Throughout their testimonies, David made occasional objections. When their statements veered into hearsay or unsubstantiated claims, most of which Judge Martinez sustained when it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and reminded myself to stick to the facts. I explained how I had put myself through college without parental support, how I had built my financial stability through years of careful planning and sacrifice, and how I had never, not once, agreed to take on a mortgage for my sister, Miss Mitchell. Judge Martinez asked, have there been previous instances where your parents made financial decisions on your behalf without your consent? Yes, Your Honor, I replied, and proceeded to detail several smaller instances over the years, credit card applications submitted in my name, loan co-signing I hadn't agreed to, tax returns filed on my behalf without my review. And did you confront them about these incidents? I did, Your Honor. Each time they dismissed my concerns. saying it was just family helping family and that I was being unnecessarily formal about money matters. During cross-examination, Peterson tried to portray me as cold and uncaring, asking loaded questions like, "Isn't it true that you consistently put your own financial interests above your sister's well-being? And would it really have been such a hardship to help your struggling sister when you're doing so well financially?" David objected to most of these questions as argumentative, and Judge Martinez sustained the objections, occasionally reminding Peterson to stick to legally relevant questions. The most damning evidence came during the final phase of the hearing, when David introduced a series of text messages and emails between my parents that had been discovered through the legal process. In one exchange, my father had written to my mother, "Sarah will never agree to this if we ask directly. Better to move forward and present it as a fait accompli. She's always been too independent for her own good." In another, my mother had replied, "Once the papers are signed and Emma is moved in, what can she really do? She won't let her sister become homeless, no matter how much she complains." These messages revealed the premeditated nature of their actions and directly contradicted their testimony about implied authority and family understanding. The courtroom was silent as David read each message aloud. The calculated deception lay bare for everyone to see. As the hearing concluded, Judge Martinez looked at all parties over the rim of her glasses. "I'll take this matter under advisement and issue my ruling within 10 days. But I want to be very clear about something. Family relationships, no matter how close, do not override basic legal principles about consent, contracts, and identity." Theft. Court is adjourned. As we gathered our papers, I caught my mother's eye across the courtroom. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of uncertainty, maybe even regret, in her expression. But it was quickly replaced by the familiar mask of righteous indignation as she turned away. "You did well," David told me as we exited the courthouse. The judge seemed very receptive to our arguments, and those text messages were particularly compelling. But I have to warn you, legal victories rarely feel satisfying in family cases. "Are you prepared for that?" I nodded slowly. I think I realized something important in there today. This was never really about the money. It was about respect or the lack of it. They've never respected me as an independent adult with the right to make my own choices. And now, David asked, now I need to respect myself enough to hold that boundary, whatever the judge decides. As we parted ways on the courthouse steps, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. The outcome still hung in the balance, but I had spoken my truth, not just to the court, but to my family and to myself. Whatever happened next, that at least was a victory no one could take from me. 7 days after the hearing, I was in a client meeting at work when my phone buzzed with a text from David. "Ruling is in. Call me when you can." My heart pounded as I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. David answered on the first ring. "Judge Martinez dismissed the case with prejudice," he said without preamble. "She also granted our motion for sanctions against your parents and their attorney for filing a frivolous lawsuit." I leaned against the wall, legs suddenly weak. What exactly does that mean? It means several things. First, the case is completely dead. They can't refile it or bring these claims again. Second, they'll have to pay a portion of your legal fees as a penalty for abusing the legal system. And third, the judge included some very strongly worded language about their conduct that might be relevant if the mortgage company or prosecutors decide to pursue the fraud angle. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me in waves. How much are my legal fees? She awarded $18,000, which won't cover everything, but will certainly help. There's more, though. The judge also granted a temporary restraining order preventing your parents or sister from contacting you directly for the next 90 days. She cited the pattern of harassment and intimidation. I hadn't even asked for a restraining order, though David had suggested it. Judge Martinez had evidently seen enough in the evidence to determine it was necessary. "There's one more thing," David continued. Judge Martinez referred the matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal investigation regarding the mortgage fraud. That doesn't mean charges will definitely be filed. That's entirely up to the DA, but the possibility is now on the table. This news landed with more complexity than I expected. While part of me felt vindicated that the legal system had recognized the severity of what my parents had done, another part still recoiled at the thought of them facing criminal charges. What happens with the house and mortgage? I asked. The judge ordered that the mortgage company be formally notified of her findings, which should help resolve your fraud claim with them. As for the house itself, that's between your parents, your sister, and the mortgage company now. Legally, you're completely disconnected from it. When I hung up, I sat in the office stairwell for several minutes, trying to process the mixture of relief, vindication, grief, and lingering anger that swirled within me. I had won, completely and unequivocally. Yet victory felt nothing like I had imagined it would. News of the ruling spread quickly. By that evening, it had somehow leaked to local media, with a headline in the Boston Herald's online edition reading, "Judge rules against parents who forged daughter's signature on mortgage." The article was brief but accurate, citing court documents and including a statement from David about the importance of respecting financial boundaries, even within families. I turned off my phone that night, unable to face the inevitable barrage of reactions. When I turned it back on the next morning, I had 53 missed calls, over 100 text messages, and countless social media notifications. Some were from journalists seeking comments. Many were from extended family members, some expressing shock and support, others condemning me for taking family matters to court. Several were from old friends who had initially sided with Emma, but were now awkwardly attempting to reconnect. The most shocking, however, was a voicemail from Emma herself, left at 2:47 a.m. "I hope you're happy now," she slurred, clearly intoxicated. "Mom's had 3 panic attacks since the ruling. Dad's talking about declaring bankruptcy, and I have 30 days to get out of my house because the bank is foreclosing. You destroyed this family, Sarah. I always knew you were selfish, but I never thought you'd go this far. I hope your precious money keeps you warm at night because you don't have a family anymore." I deleted the message after listening to it once, deciding not to give it any power over my emotions. Whatever happened with the house was the consequence of my parents' actions, not mine. I couldn't control how they chose to interpret events, or whether they ever accepted responsibility. 3 days after the ruling, I received an unexpected email from my Uncle Paul, my father's brother, who had distanced himself from the family years ago for reasons I'd never fully understood. "Sarah, I've been following what happened with your parents and the mortgage situation. I want you to know that I'm proud of you for standing your ground. What they did to you, they did similar versions of to me back in the 90s. It's a pattern that goes back generations in this family. I'm sorry you had to go through this alone. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." His email provided a missing piece of the puzzle. This wasn't just about me or even about Emma. It was about a deeply entrenched family dynamic of financial exploitation, disguised as family helping family. Knowing that I wasn't the first to experience it, and that Uncle Paul had survived and thrived after setting boundaries, gave me a strange sense of peace. A week later, the mortgage company formally concluded their fraud investigation, sending me official documentation that my name had been removed from all records associated with the property, and that my credit report would be corrected. They were pursuing their own legal options against my parents, but assured me that I was completely cleared of any responsibility. The media attention faded quickly. My story was unusual enough to make local news, but not sensational enough to have staying power. Within 2 weeks, the articles disappeared from front pages, replaced by newer scandals and human interest stories. What didn't fade as quickly were the personal reverberations. Extended family members who had initially condemned me started reaching out after reading the judge's ruling, offering belated support that fell hollow after their earlier silence. I responded politely but distantly to most, recognizing that rebuilding trust would take time. If it happened at all, Emma's social media underwent a dramatic transformation. Gone were the smug photos of her house, replaced by vague inspirational quotes about overcoming adversity and dealing with toxic people. She never directly mentioned me or the lawsuit, but her passive-aggressive allusions were transparent to anyone familiar with the situation. According to mutual acquaintances, Emma had moved back into my parents' basement while they appealed to the mortgage company for leniency. The house in Newton stood empty, a physical manifestation of the consequences of their actions. My mother attempted to contact me once, about a month after the ruling, from a new phone number that bypassed my blocking. Her voicemail was brief and tense. "Sarah, this has all gone too far. We need to talk as a family and find a solution." Call me back? I didn't. The most unexpected outcome came 6 weeks after the court ruling when I received a formal letter from the district attorney's office. They had reviewed Judge Martinez's referral and had decided not to pursue criminal charges against my parents, citing my lack of interest in pressing charges and the civil remedies already applied. The letter concluded with a note that the decision could be revisited if new evidence emerged or if I changed my mind about criminal proceedings. Felt immense relief at this news. While I had needed to protect myself legally and financially, I had never wanted to see my parents face criminal penalties. The civil ruling had accomplished what I needed, a clean break from the fraudulent mortgage and formal recognition that what they had done was wrong. If you're dealing with family financial abuse right now, I want you to know that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary self-care. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating complex family dynamics. As the initial shock wave settled, I focused on rebuilding both my financial security and my emotional well-being. The $18,000 in awarded legal fees helped offset some of my costs, though I had still spent considerably more defending myself than I recovered. I created a new budget, started rebuilding my emergency fund, and resumed contributions to my retirement accounts. More importantly, I began rebuilding my sense of self. I found a new therapist, Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, who specialized in family estrangement and financial abuse, someone who validated my experience, instead of pushing for reconciliation at any cost. What your parents did wasn't just financial abuse. Dr. Rodriguez explained during one of our early sessions. It was a fundamental violation of your autonomy and identity. The fact that they used your own success against you makes it particularly insidious. Those words helped me understand why the betrayal had cut so deep. It wasn't just about the money or even the forgery. It was about how my achievements, the very things I was most proud of, had been weaponized against me by the people who should have celebrated them. I reconnected with friends who had stood by me during the ordeal and gradually expanded my social circle to include people who understood healthy boundaries. I joined a support group for survivors of family financial abuse, where I found a community of people who truly understood what I'd been through. 6 months after the ruling, I received an unexpected package at my apartment. Inside was a small wooden jewelry box I recognized from my childhood, one my grandfather had made for me that had always remained at my parents' house. With it was a brief note in my grandmother Rose's handwriting. "This belongs with you. Love always, Grandma." I called her that evening, and for the first time, she shared her own complicated history with my parents. "Your mother has always played favorites," she said gently. "She did it with her own sisters, too. I should have stepped in more when you were young, but, well, hindsight is always clearer." That conversation with Grandma Rose was the beginning of a new relationship between us, one based on mutual respect and honest communication rather than the performative family harmony that had masked dysfunction for so long. As the 6-month mark passed, I realized something important. Despite the trauma and financial strain of the lawsuit, I felt lighter than I had in years. The constant anxiety of waiting for the next unreasonable family demand had lifted. The exhausting effort of trying to earn approval that would never come had ceased. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was truly independent, not just financially, but emotionally. The media attention had entirely disappeared by then. But occasionally, I would receive a message from a stranger who had heard about my case through legal circles or personal networks. Your story helped me set boundaries with my own financially abusive parents, one woman wrote. Thank you for fighting so publicly for what was right. These messages reminded me that standing up for myself hadn't just been about a mortgage or money. It had been about challenging a narrative that financial exploitation is acceptable when it comes from family, a narrative that traps too many people in cycles of abuse disguised as love. I never did hear directly from my parents again. Through the family grapevine, I learned that they had indeed declared bankruptcy and were downsizing to a smaller home. Emma had apparently found a job as an administrative assistant and was turning her life around, though what that meant in practical terms varied depending on who was telling the story. I wished them well from a distance, but I had no illusions about reconciliation. Some bridges, once burned, cannot and should not be rebuilt. Some relationships are healthier in their absence than in their presence. One crisp autumn day, about 8 months after the court ruling, I was having coffee with my friend Lisa when she asked a question that gave me pause. Do you ever regret it? Standing your ground, given everything it cost you. I considered the question carefully, watching the steam rise from my coffee cup. No, I said finally. It cost me a lot, financially, emotionally, even some relationships I thought were solid. But it gave me something more valuable, the knowledge that I can protect myself, that my boundaries matter, and that I don't have to set myself on fire to keep others warm. Lisa nodded, understanding in her eyes. That's worth more than a house in Newton. Exactly, I smiled. It's the foundation for building something better. 1 year after Judge Martinez dismissed my parents' lawsuit, I found myself sitting in a small cafe in Cambridge, across from a young woman named Jessica, who reminded me painfully of myself from 18 months earlier. She was clutching a folder of bank statements, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion and stress. My parents took out a car loan in my name, she explained, voice trembling. They say it's my duty to help them since they raised me, but I'm still paying off my student loans, and I can barely make my own rent. I had met Jessica through an online support group for survivors of family financial abuse, a group I had joined during my own healing journey and eventually became a moderator for. This was our first in-person meeting, a step beyond the digital conversations that had connected us. First, I told her gently, I want you to know that you're not alone in this. What they're doing is not normal or acceptable, no matter how they try to frame it. As I walked her through her options, from credit freezes to formal fraud reports to potential legal remedies, I reflected on how far I had come in my own recovery process. The immediate aftermath of the lawsuit had been brutal. Despite the legal victory, I had experienced profound grief, not just for the family I had lost, but for the family I had never actually had, the idealized version of my parents and sister that I had clung to for so long had been irrevocably shattered, forcing me to confront the reality that they had always viewed me more as a resource than as a person with my own needs and boundaries. But now, helping Jessica navigate her own crisis, I felt something I hadn't expected: purpose. My pain had meaning if it could help others avoid or escape similar situations. What if they never forgive me? Jessica asked finally, voicing the question that had haunted me for months. That's the hardest part, I admitted. But eventually, I realized I was asking the wrong question. The real question isn't whether they'll forgive you for protecting yourself. It's whether you'll forgive yourself if you don't. Jessica nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. I think I need to make some calls, she said. Gathering her documents with new purpose as we parted, I handed her my card. Whatever you decide, you're not alone in this. The group is there, and so am I. Walking back to my condo afterward, I reflected on the strange, painful, ultimately liberating journey of the past 2 years. The family I had desperately tried to please for 34 years was no longer in my life, and that loss still ached in quiet moments. But in their place had grown something perhaps more valuable, an unshakable trust in my own judgment. A community of chosen family built on mutual respect rather than obligation, and the knowledge that I had the strength to protect my boundaries even against the people I had been taught all my life to sacrifice them for. The lawsuit that my parents had intended as a tool of control had instead become the catalyst for my complete liberation from their emotional and financial manipulation. In trying to force me to pay for a house for Emma, they had inadvertently pushed me to build something far more valuable for myself, a life defined by authentic connections, clear boundaries, and the quiet confidence that comes from weathering a storm and finding yourself still standing on the other side. As I reached my building, my phone pinged with a message from the support group moderators. Another new member had joined, sharing a story distressingly similar to mine and Jessica's. I paused on my doorstep, composing a thoughtful welcome message. The cycle of financial exploitation that had damaged so many families might never be completely broken. But each person who found the courage to say, "No more," weakened its hold on future generations. That, perhaps, was the most profound lesson of my journey, that sometimes the most loving legacy we can leave is not financial support or material assistance, but the example of what healthy boundaries look like and the courage to maintain them, even at great personal cost. Standing up for yourself isn't just about protecting your bank account, it's about protecting your dignity, your future, and sometimes your very sense of self. If my story has resonated with you, I hope it gives you the courage to honor your own boundaries, whatever they may be. And remember, family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, love, and mutual support. Sometimes the family that matters most is the one you choose, not the one you're born into. Thank you for listening to my story. If it helped you in any way, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Together, we can break these cycles and build healthier families for the future.